He turned his passion of educating others on how to start, grow, and avoid mistakes in business and finances into a book on financial literacy for kids that debuted #1 on Amazon's new releases. Joining me from the Misguided Podcast and the author of Money Talks, The Beginner's Guide to Investing for Kids, is Juwan Rohan. Juwan, thank you so much for joining us here on Live in the Bay.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for having me. I've watched this since I was a kid. So.
Oh, good. I want to talk a little bit about your background. You're an entrepreneur, you're a businessman, and you started the Misguided Podcast. What is it about?
Yeah, the Misguided Podcast was an opportunity for me to really help young kids and entrepreneurs understand the mistakes in business and learn financial literacy.
You mentioned about learning the mistakes. Why is it important to highlight the mistakes that people are making in business? For you, why is that important?
Because if you don't recognize it as a mistake, it becomes a habit. And so the goal is to make those mistakes into lessons.
What's an example that you might have of something like this that happened in your life that you were able to learn from?
Yeah, it all began mismanaging money at a young age. You know, after college, you get a good job and then you start having money come in, and then you're not sure how to manage it correctly. And so I started seeing my bank account disappear, and I always wanted to fix that.
Yeah, you mentioned learning from a young age. Is that what inspired you to write a book for kids? Let's talk about that book and kind of what inspired you to write that.
Yeah, well, you know, the pandemic happened, so we had a lot of time on our hands. I've always loved putting ideas to paper, and I was inspired by a gentleman I actually had interviewed, and he inspired me to write the book. I went, drafted it within 24 hours, and I've always had the idea to help kids learn what I wish I would have known.
Why is it so important to start with kids and starting at an early age to you?
That's a great question. You know, kids, they just sometimes need a little push. And, you know, I think it's important. I had kids, so that was kind of a pivotal time in my life where I was like, I want them to grow up in a better position than I was. And so for me, it was important to start young because sometimes they just need that little push to take that step forward.
Talk about some of the tips that are in the book that you wrote about and why you wanted to specifically include those ones.
Yeah, definitely. The tips I kind of talk about are, you know, just the basics. What is budgeting? You know, a lot of people don't know what an Excel sheet is and what expenses and your income is. And so that was one of the things. Another one was what is finance? A lot of people actually don't know what it is. What is money? You know, and so I go into the history of money, how it was created. You know, how it began as like a bargaining. You know, where people would trade rice for you know, anything else. And so I just kind of go into the history of that and try and bring it into the new world.
I love that. I want to talk about this book because it debuted #1 on Amazon, and that's quite an accomplishment.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
How was that? How did you deal with that? What was that like for you, seeing that your book was debuted at #1?
It's shocking. It's shocking. You know, you just wake up, you know, it's released, you know, you've put in the time to get pre-orders, and you know, you've done the work, and then you wake up and you see it. #1 new releases, #3 bestseller. I mean, you know, a lot of people celebrate number one bestseller, but I think #3 is pretty big, especially because I never had goals to write a book. Right, and so yeah, it was an amazing feeling for sure.
We were talking a little bit earlier about the importance of, you know, highlighting failures and what that means and how people can really learn from that. Is that something that you put into this book as well?
Yeah, I kind of try and go into it. You know, when writing the book, I wanted to make it easy for people to understand who don't know nothing about it. And so my goal is, you know, to have these two kids have a conversation. Money is such a taboo topic, and it's awkward, you know, when you talk about it. And so that's why it's in dialogue form. And they kind of go into, you know, a mentor-mentee type of relationship, which to me, that mentor is teaching the mentee about mistakes.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I wanted to express how you can learn from mistakes.
Speaking of mentors and mentees, you've gone out and you've been able to speak in classrooms to kids about this. What has that experience been like?
The best feeling, walking away with kids asking questions, or I recently last week had a kid, you know, really want to learn more about the business he was trying to create. And that was such an exciting feeling, knowing that I'm giving back to the community. It's a great feeling. I can't even explain it.
Yeah, I think financial literacy is something that kids need as well as adults. I'm sure that I'm going to be getting a text from my husband soon saying, make sure you bring a copy of that book home for yourself. So I know that there's lots to learn there for everyone. So I just want to thank you so much for joining us here on Live in the Bay and sharing that with us.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.